ANA eLearning Academy is brought to you by CDN Graysheet, a trusted source of rare coin and currency valuations since 1963.
Hello everyone, thank you for joining us today for the ANA eLearning Academy. The ANA would like to thank our partner Graysheet for their support of the eLearning Academy. Today we have Bob Bair, who will be presenting on their last hurrah, the reunions of veterans of the 1863 Battle of Gettysburg and the numismatically related memorabilia which marked their passage. You will be muted for this presentation, so please leave any questions or comments in the chat or Q&A box, and I will read them to Bob at the end. And without further ado, here's Bob.
I appreciate it, Logan. Thank you very much. And thank you, listeners and viewers, to this presentation. Now, I should let you know right off the bat that I'm an unreconstructed history teacher. In real life, I was a teacher and school principal for a lot of years, and came to appreciate, really even from an early age, the extent to which this Battle of Gettysburg was absolutely monumental in its effect on America then and now. Just an incredible thing. There have been some coins done concerning the Battle of Gettysburg, and we'll take a look at those. We're also going to branch out into memorabilia and souvenirs and things related to the various reunions of those soldiers from both sides who'd taken part in the Battle of Gettysburg, who met in later years. What we're going to see in this presentation is some amount of what I hope is a palatable history of the Battle of Gettysburg that doesn't take too long. Once again, as an unreconstructed history teacher, I can't help myself. And of course, some of you perhaps, back in the day when you were in history classes were busy passing notes to attractive classmates or whatever, and may or may not have paid attention, but hey, this is your second chance to get that exposure. So we'll take a look at some of the history. We're going to see a couple of quick clips from Ted Turner's 1993 movie Gettysburg, which in my opinion is a very accurate and an incredible summary of what this was and what it does, what the movie does, and what I hope to do here is bring to life some of the people. This isn't just about dates and troops moving here and there. It's ultimately, history is ultimately about people pretty much like us, and we get to meet people that we otherwise wouldn't have through an exposure like this. So we're going to take a look at the history. We'll take a look at parts of Ted Turner's movie, and of course we'll take a look at some of the militaria, some of the coinage, some of the medals that were associated with the various reunions, etc. We'll start. Let's take a look at this one. Here's a picture from the 1913 50th anniversary reunion at Gettysburg. This is on Hill Little Round Top. The statue next to the two old soldiers here is a Union officer, Governor Warren, who basically was crucial in the Battle of Gettysburg for noticing that Little Round Top, which offered an exposure to a large percentage of the Union not fortifications, but the Union troop locations, was unguarded. And Governor Warren, began to try to draw attention to that and get someone from the Union side to help take Little Round Top before the Confederates got it. They made it by about 40 yards. Confederates were coming up Little Round Top as the troops that Strong Vincent, an officer that Warren had contacted and who took the initiative before he and Patty O'Rourke and some others brought enough troops that they got Little Round Top, and they then had the opportunity to place cannon around it and so on. And many of you have heard of Joshua Chamberlain and the 20th Maine, who basically protected the flank around Little Round Top and kept Confederates who were repeatedly attacking, trying to flank the Union forces and get control of Little Round Top to place their cannons on it. That was a memorable part of the battle as well. But here's two old guys who'd been there, and one's pointing off. I was over there with under Anderson's command over there by the wheat field, as the other old gentleman is listening. Pictures like this is one of my favorite pictures from the reunions for that blend of there's the statue, there's the monument of Warren, but here's two guys who were actually there and were actually part of this. Well, here's what Lincoln had to say in the Gettysburg Address regarding the impact of this. The map just shows you, with the highlighted portions, where Gettysburg is located. The little town was like 2,400 people or so at the time that the battle happened there. Not all that far from Baltimore, about 75 miles and about less than 100 from Washington, D.C. It was Lee's attempt to stage and win a major battle in the North. The South still had hopes of getting Britain and France as allies in the Civil War. They'd been both Britain and France had been kind of waiting to see how it was going to go before they would commit to something like that. But here's Lincoln saying quite correctly that the world will little note nor long remember what we say here. Well, Lincoln's Gettysburg Address is incredibly memorable and won't be forgotten. But also what it commemorated, what the actions of the troops at Gettysburg were, can never be forgotten either. Here's why this little town of 2,400 ended up being an incredibly major battlefield. It just had roads, I don't know, I think there are 10 or something like that, coming from every direction. And what that meant was that when Union and Southern forces bumped into one another, the legend is that Southern troops had heard a rumor that there was a shoe factory in Gettysburg, and a lot of them didn't have shoes, so they wanted to see if they could find some. They also needed supplies generally, shoes or not, they would have headed toward Gettysburg. But kind of to the northwest, basically a cavalry detachment from Union forces ran into Confederates who were headed to Gettysburg looking for supplies. And fighting started, and word spread, and troops were able to come on all those different roads to come to Gettysburg. And it was like a snowball rolling down a mountainside, becoming bigger and bigger and bigger the farther it goes. And this became bigger and bigger because of all those roads that offered all kinds of transportation to troops from both sides. Well, it was a 3-day thing, and it determined the outcome of the Civil War, America's future, the whole deal. Basically, a synopsis of the 3 days. The fighting was west and north of Gettysburg, where it started. The Union was driven back into the area of Gettysburg, but not dispersed or wiped out. By the second day, the northern line of Union forces, there's conflict to the north and also to the south of the Union lines, done by Southern forces trying to roll them up or trying to drive them back. And the third day, Lee had not had the benefit of Jeb Stuart, his cavalry guy, providing information about Union forces. Stuart was off capturing a bunch of Union supply wagons and so on, which was nice, but the timing was off. Lee needed his eyes and information. But basically by the third day, Lee had tried both the northern and southern parts of Union lines and thought, all right, time to try the center. And that led to the famous Pickett's Charge, which we're going to see part of when we see a clip from Ted Turner's movie as he introduces us to Louis Armistead, an interesting and kind of tragic figure on the southern side, but the kind of the spear point of Pickett's Charge as it tried to break the Union lines in the center. Well, here is Louis Armistead to your left, and his wonderful good friend, Winfield Scott Hancock. They'd known each other for 17 or so years. Armistead had 2 wives and his first child die. And basically Hancock and Hancock's wife almost adopted, if you can say that, Armistead. It made him a member of the family, it's safe to say. Their friendship was that close. Well, when the Civil War came, as was the case with a lot of people, a lot of soldiers who'd, for instance, gone through West Point together and were good friends, they had to make a choice. Which side are we going to go on? Are we going to, if we're from Virginia, are we going to support Virginia, or are we going to support the Union? What are we going to do? Their friendship was put on hold as Armistead obviously chose the South, and Hancock, an important general at Gettysburg, chose the North. All right, both men were wounded at Gettysburg, Armistead fatally, and Ted Turner is going to do part of letting you know about Armistead will be his leading Pickett's charge, or part of Pickett's charge. He stuck his hat on his sword and held up his sword so that his men would be able to see the hat and him and follow the hat through the confusion of battle as it headed across about a mile of open field to attack the Union center that was behind a stone wall there that came to be called the Bloody Angle. Here's a picture showing Armistead with his hat on his sword, leading the men so that they could follow him and come to the Union forces as a force together rather than two dispersed and spread out. All right, now we're headed toward what you've been waiting for. There were coins, medals, exonumia that were generated by the veterans' reunions and at the Battle of Gettysburg commemorations afterwards. There are various Civil War veteran reunions held. Understandably, the 25th anniversary of the battle in 1888, and there had been some kind of semi-formal divisional and unit reunions held at the battlefield prior to 1888. But 1888 was the first time that a reunion was held that was open to the South, to Southern soldiers as well. There'd been Union commemorations or gatherings prior to 1888, but this one involved some number of Southern troops as well. And that became a theme at the reunions to follow. The theme being that, fine, we don't need to get into, refighting the war or the battle, but to come together as Americans who were part of a major historic event is our goal from here on. There was one in 1913, the biggest gathering at Gettysburg, and we're going to see some pictures and so on from that. And the last one, 75 years afterward. Average age of Civil War veterans in 1938 was 94, but some number came to the last official reunion of actual Gettysburg veterans in 1938. There are other commemorations, the 100th anniversary, and I'll have more on this later, but I didn't go in early July 1963. My family wasn't ready to take a vacation in that direction then, but I did get to the battlefield at Gettysburg in late July of 1963, a couple weeks after the commemoration, and I'll have a story or two to tell you there. Then lastly, the sesquicentennial, the 150th anniversary in 2013, was also celebrated and commemorated. In 1888, about 30,000 veterans or so from both sides came. And once again, the theme was reconciliation and kind of an amity and appreciation of each other. In this picture to your left, the figure with kind of the white top hat is Joshua Chamberlain of the 20th Maine, the guy whose troops had kept the South from from flanking Union forces and taking Little Round Top. Daniel Butterfield, who was Meade's adjutant, is the second one on the left. In the middle is James Longstreet, who was Lee's first corps commander, and a guy that Lee often listened to. Longstreet was a defensive-minded general more than an offensive one, and Lee was there to attack and try to win a battle. But Longstreet was an important figure at Gettysburg and an important figure at this reunion. And the guy on Longstreet's left is Daniel Sickles, a Union general who wasn't afraid to attack, but kind of in violation of orders on the second day, went on an attack unsupported that left Little Round Top unguarded and isolated, and very nearly got him and his troops in trouble in terms of the fighting. Sickles lost a leg there. He's shown with crutches. And the other figures, I can't make them out, so not certain who they are, but the point is that these were important figures at the Battle of Gettysburg, all of these men, and they got together, as you can see on the medallion, which was presented to everyone that came. It's a reunion of the blue and the gray, and they're shaking hands. That's an important theme of this first gathering. And this is the first commemoration or bit of exonumia or militaria or whatever that was presented to troops of both sides. Here we come to 1913, the 50th anniversary and the largest reunion ever. There's that picture again, among my favorites, of the old veteran pointing where he had been during the battle itself. The picture on the right shows Union and Confederate veterans who were at Pickett's charge. The Confederate veterans shaking hands there are on the side from which they and the troops led by George Pickett had come across the open field. And the guys in blue, the Union veterans, were at the wall and around the wall to repel Pickett's advance. This is what one of the old veterans there had to say: I've seen war. I want to see it no more. Let us have peace. Well, there were over 53,000 Civil War veterans convened there. They had 6,600 eight-man tents covering 280 acres of the battlefield for the veterans to stay at. The state of Pennsylvania provided almost $500,000, which is big money in 1913. The federal government, $150,000, and individual states came up with enough to make the total subsidy funding this reunion right around $1 million. Woodrow Wilson was there and briefly spoke, and he played on that theme of amity and union again. The special valor shown by both sides, even though one side was clearly wrong in supporting slavery and disunion. We say with the Pledge of Allegiance, one nation under God, indivisible, for a reason. But Wilson added stature to that gathering there. And we saw the ceremonial walkthrough, the picture of that as Union veterans and the Confederate veterans met at the Bloody Angle, which has been described as the high water mark of the Confederacy. Pickett's charge was broken there. That was as far as they got, with that Spear Point and Armistead and the rest either being captured or killed or slowly retreating back across the field that they'd traversed. Here's some of the items that are, their militaria, their memorabilia, their exonumia in a way, But these were the kinds of things that, as you can see, for instance, by looking at the image of some of the medals created and given to participants. There's one for the veterans from North Dakota. There's one for Minnesota, and so on and so on. They tended to be pretty individualistic. I own this little Gettysburg cup, China cup. I don't even remember where I got it or how, but I've always been fascinated by Gettysburg and its history, and realizing that that was one of the available souvenirs or whatever to those who came to the 1913 reunion, I couldn't help but acquire it for myself. There was another reunion, and everyone understood this was it, the calling of the final roll. Boy, there were hardly any Civil War veterans left, maybe about 8,000 or thereabouts. And everyone understood that this was going to be it in terms of actually having the Civil War veterans who had been at Gettysburg alive and able to be present for any more commemorations. Well, a little under 2,000 of them, average age of 94, came, as the caption says, to honor their departed comrades in arms, the battle that shaped our nation, and also the 1938 commemoration itself. The last hurrah, the calling of the final roll, took place here. Here's some of the things that came out of that final reunion. This is an eternal light monument that you see in the upper left, created at that time with a flame that burns forever, commemorating peace as represented by the end of the Civil War, which Gettysburg presaged. There's a Pennsylvania medal presented to one of the 1,845 veterans who actually came. All who came got an official pin or remembrance with Franklin Roosevelt's, then President of the US, Franklin Roosevelt's signature. And at last, finally, we see a coin. We're going to take a look at this later, but to me, an interesting feature of the coin, well done on its obverse by the designer, is to have two faces that are very similar. And the idea was to mirror the idea that this was a war often of brother against brother, of friend against friend, as was the case with Armistead and Hancock, for instance, great friends, but choosing different paths for themselves. You know, Robert E. Lee was desired to be a general for the Union forces when Civil War was imminent, but he chose Virginia, as had Armistead, his home. The back uses the same fasces bands put together, similar to what you see on the Mercury dime, to indicate out of many one, that individually, when we're together, we're a lot stronger than when we're one single stick that can be easily snapped, by anyone who wants to grab it. When they're all bound together and stand firmly together, a whole lot harder to break. Here is more on that commemorative $50. Frank Vittor was the designer. I mentioned the brother versus brother obverse and the one out of many fasces band. Little over almost 27,000 were initially sold at $1.65 each, it's dated 1936, even though the 75th reunion would be 1938. Those of you familiar with commemoratives will recall that the classic commemorative programs were basically out of control by 1936 or so. I believe the number of available commemoratives authorized for 1936 for, who knows, for Antietam, for York County, Maine, et cetera, totaled 18 or so. Basically because a commemorative coin program offered, in effect, free money to organizers of a commemoration of some kind. what it amounted to was you'd get your congressman to propose a bill to the House or the Senate, or ultimately both. You'd get, two together, a senator and a representative, to co-sponsor. It would go through Congress because everyone understood you don't make voters mad by denying a request for a commemorative coin or whatever. The president would sign it, and then the organizers of a particular event could ask the mint, or the legislation would specify how many coins would be made. They would be provided to the organizers of the event, who could charge whatever they wanted. And if they didn't sell them all for their event, they could return them to the mint at face value. So it was a no-lose proposition for the organizers, but it clearly got out of hand when you have 18 commemorative issues for York County, for Norfolk, et cetera, that are of questionable value or interest, either historically or nationally. And that was a big part of why the 1936 commemorative program ended. But okay, 23,100 out of the number that were allowed by legislation got returned to the mint. They were melted. The sales were somewhat low for an event of this type, due in part to the fact that it's 1936. There's still a depression going on, and the idea of having $1.65 in your pocket to buy a 50-cent piece was a strain for a lot of people. Later, to try to get rid of some that they hadn't turned over to the mint, they were offered at $2.50. But all right, there was also a lot of collector commemorative burnout by those 18 issues, and many prior issues engineered by event organizers who just wanted to have funding for their particular event. But this is a cool design, and it's well appreciated today, and there are a number of available issues in high grade for this. I've got a nice MS-65 CAC from it because I love the Battle of Gettysburg and the history involved. Here's some of the memorabilia from 1963, from that commemoration. The veterans by then are all dead. The last Civil War veteran, Albert Wolin from Minnesota, died in 1956. But in 1963, the 100th anniversary, in that first week in July of 1963, 200,000 or so people came for different from those different days. It started in late June and in effect ran for about 10 days. There were 12,000 or so Civil War reenactors that redid Pickett's charge and provided other scenes from the battle. And there were all kinds of medals, exonumia, and memorabilia privately created and sold as souvenirs, as memorabilia, etc. The two that you see there, starting on your left, showing George Gordon Meade, the Union commander, and Robert E. Lee. Basically, the first one is silver. It's 5 ounces of silver, and the second one is bronze. And they have the same obverse and reverse design, and I own them both. I bought the bronze one when I was there in late July of 1963. It cost, if I recall, right around $1, which is nothing today, but I was then going into my senior year in high school, and I brought as much money as I had with me to buy things like that because I thought it was important. There's an aluminum medal that was created to be sold as a souvenir as well. I don't have that one, but that's an example of a similar commemoration. Oh, I have the silver one also, although I acquired that after 1963. But I got to tell you a story about those mini balls that you see at the bottom. Basically, when I came to Gettysburg as a senior, my favorite uncle drove my brother and me after he lived in Ohio. And I persuaded my mom to take a vacation to go see her family in Ohio, including her brother, my uncle. And I arranged with the uncle, uncle, I really want to go to Gettysburg during this centennial year. Would you drive us over there? Okay, it was a long drive, but he agreed to do it, and my brother and I went. Fine. After we got there late at night, the next day, I had told my relative, told my brother and my uncle, you guys, I want to walk this entire battlefield. I'm going to go with the sun up in the morning, and I'll take as long as it takes to cover approximately 20 miles on foot. I'd read enough about Gettysburg that I knew where pretty much everything was. And I went with a couple of sandwiches and a can of Coca-Cola or whatever, and my box camera and a lot of rolls of film to take pictures. But all right, the mini balls. Toward the end of the day, I'd run out of food by then, and the battlefield was smaller in 1963 by quite a margin than it was today. Or private organizations like the American Battlefield Trust have helped add to the park, and the national government has also expanded the park by buying land that was important to the battlefield. But in 1963, I was over on the Confederate side toward the end of the day. It was probably 4 o'clock in the afternoon or something. And you saw that picture of the roads coming in like spokes on a wheel into Gettysburg. And from Seminary Ridge, there was one that headed to the west and north. And as I was walking along that part, I'd gone over the whole battlefield, following the course of the battle. The first day I was up to the north and west, second day, Culp's Hill, and so on and so on. But as I looked down that road on the third day, I saw a little country store about a quarter mile down the road. And well, all right, I'm out of food, I'm gonna go there. So I went down there, and sure enough, it's a little country store run by a balding Pennsylvania Dutch little country storekeeper, a perfect stereotype. And I'm getting, some chips and a Coke and a sandwich or whatever. And I go to the counter to check out, and he's got a gigantic bread bowl, sort of like the one you see here that homemade bread would rise in. And he's got a little hand printed sign on it that says battlefield bullets, 25 cents each. I look in this bread bowl, and I'll pick a number and say there are at least 50, maybe as many as 100 mini balls that had either been fired at the Battle of Gettysburg or dropped, but all showing the effects of calcification from having been in the ground. Holy cow, I said to the storekeeper, where did you get all these bullets? Ah, Sonny, he says, every spring when the farmers plowed their fields, they turned these things up, and then they sell them to guys like me, so I can sell them to guys like you. I bought 5 of them at 25 cents each, and those are the 5. But quite a personal bit of memorabilia from my involvement at the 1963 100th year of Gettysburg. Now we come to some coins finally, besides the 1936 dated commemorative half. Gettysburg reappeared again twice on US coinage. Here's the America the Beautiful quarter. And I'm sure you're familiar with kind of the modern quarters that have been done for various themes on coins that circulate. And here's an example of one. Quite a few were done. Phoebe Hemphill, Joel Iskowitz were the sculptors who were involved in this. They were, for circulation, 61,200,000 Philadelphia and Denver coins were struck. There were both clad and silver S-mint proofs, just under 2 million. They all featured the America the Beautiful quarter and had the monument to the 72nd Pennsylvania, which was either at or shortly behind in reserve at the Bloody Angle area. But the statue, of the soldier with his rifle about to, strike the enemy because he didn't have time to reload or whatever in the hand-to-hand fighting, is pretty memorable. And was used on this America the Beautiful quarter design. Here's another one, the same design used on the 5-ounce silver coin, what collectors tend to call hockey pucks. They're big, they're hard to store, but there's 5 ounces of silver and a very large commemoration of, in this case, the Gettysburg battle, and in particular, the 72nd Pennsylvania monument. Well, they made 126,700 mint state hockey pucks, so to speak, and just under 25,000 of the burnished specimens that were produced at the Philadelphia Mint. So there, once again, is another coin commemorating the Battle of Gettysburg. All right, the 150th anniversary, long after there are no more veterans, they've all died. Once again, lots of people attended in 2013, the sesquicentennial, the 150th anniversary. Somewhere between 200 to 300,000 came for one or more days of this commemoration. Once again, about 12,000 Civil War reenactors staged highlights, especially the Pickett's Charge at the Battle of Gettysburg. And boy, there were, when I researched this a little bit, there are over 40 examples of memorabilia that you could have bought in 2013 that were made privately and were sold privately as, fundraisers for individuals or businesses or just about whatever. Here's a couple of them. You could get, there's that one to your left, there's Armistead with his hat on his sword again at the bloody angle. There's an elongated cent showing the 72nd Pennsylvania monument that you could have bought. As my caption says, you could have bought a Battle of Gettysburg shot glass if you'd wanted one, to put your Chivas in or whatever before you drink it. You could get a Battle of Gettysburg piggy bank for your kids. T-shirts, of course, commemorating the battle were available, and on for 40 plus examples of memorabilia. Here's a forever stamp to your right that was created for commemoration of the 150th anniversary of the Battle of Gettysburg, a forever stamp in 2013, and a neat one showing showing Pickett's Charge coming to the shadows lengthen. Our past and all the players who shaped it fade slowly from memory. Can we hold them close to ourselves for just a little longer? They deserve it, and so do we. These are some of the many memorable pictures that commemorate Gettysburg, that show some of the monuments there. And the monuments represent the efforts of both Northern and Southern soldiers in their valor, fighting for a cause they believed in, and ultimately the Union winning, and it was important that they did for lots of reasons. But the commemoration of the soldiers on both sides is captured in pictures like this. Or pictures like this. There's the statue of Governor Warren, once again, the 1913 veterans talking about where they'd been. But here is fog surrounding Governor Warren, the statue of Governor Warren, symbolizing, aside from being a cool picture, symbolizing the fading of Gettysburg and its individuals into the past. This is one of the pictures I took with my little box camera. This is over on Seminary Ridge, the southern line where the Southern troops had gathered, with the sun beginning to set behind a Southern cannon. But I always liked the symbolism indicated by that, as really the sunset for the Confederacy at Gettysburg, and for lots of reasons, it's a good thing that it did. And here we come to the kind of exonumia and numismatic items commemorating the battle. There's a very nicely toned Gettysburg commemorative $50 that had probably been in an album with a Whitman album or something, that where the toning around the rim happened because of sulfur in the cardboard. And there's that silver 5-ounce medallion that I acquired after 1963 that commemorates the Battle of Gettysburg. And that, ladies and gentlemen, constitutes my presentation. I hope you've enjoyed it and found it somewhat enjoyable, even though it's had a lot of history to it. But it's a commemoration of reunions, of the memorabilia associated with the reunions, and an honoring of a battle that was monumental in U.S. history. So there we go, Logan. Thank you for having me, and thanks to all who watched and took part in this. Hopefully you all enjoyed it. Thank you all.
Yes, that was wonderful. I actually personally, I'm not a huge numismatist, but I do love history. So the ones where it's more about history, selfishly, are more interesting to me. But it doesn't look like there's any questions. So we'll go ahead and say thank you, Bob, and thank you to Gray Sheet again for their support of this this academy and getting this out there to everyone who likes to watch it. Thank you all for attending, and we'll hope to see you on some future ones. And thanks again, Bob. That was wonderful.
Thank you, Logan.
Have a great day.
You too.